I'm joined by U.S. Senator from Virginia, Mark Warner. Thanks so much for joining me.
Brian, thanks for having me.
So first and foremost, we're watching this Pete Hegseth situation unfold. Does it look, from your vantage, like Pete Hegseth is busy right now throwing Mitch Bradley under the bus to try and protect himself by basically wrapping his blame for the whole September 2nd strike in praise by saying, this strike was his decision, but we stand behind him in having made that decision?
You're absolutely right. And Mitch Bradley is a decorated admiral, has been in charge of Special Forces Command for some time. And remember, this is the same Pete Hegseth who, around the time of the strike, bragged that he watched the whole thing and that he was the guy in charge. I mean, this is the macho guy who, brought all our military leadership to Quantico and lectured them on being a warrior class. And it sure does seem to me that this is a guy that's also trying to run for the hills and, frankly, trash Admiral Bradley or potentially have him, be the fall guy. I'm going to see Admiral Bradley tomorrow, so I'm going to hopefully get the straight scoop. But this is not a one-off with Pete Hegseth, as you know.
You had mentioned that you're going to see Mitch Bradley tomorrow. So what will that conversation include? Will it be public? Is any of it going to be on the record? Like, what can we expect as the result of that?
He's originally going to meet with the Senate Armed Services Committee and House Armed Services Committee. Then I'm going to meet with him. I'm not sure as one of the so-called Gang of Eight. I was chair now, vice chair of the Intel Committee. I'm not sure if the chair, Tom Cotton's going to be there. He may have to have left town. And I'm going to ask him to just tell the truth. The fact is, there wouldn't even be a controversy if the administration had released the unedited video. Hegseth bragged about the whole video, then release the damn thing. The fact that they've not means they've got something to hide. I'm going to ask, did Admiral Bradley go ahead and make the order? What were the circumstances? How do you explain this? Does he feel, as somebody that's been a career military professional, whether this order was legal? And I hope we can get to the bottom of this. But this is not going to be a good 24 hours for Pete Hegseth, because we've got this meeting with Admiral Bradley at the same time that the Signalgate investigation report has come out, which I've had briefed to me and will be released to the public tomorrow with a small bit of redaction.
Sticking with the Admiral Bradley situation for a moment, given the fact that we know that Republican chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, has promised a full, rigorous investigation into what happened, is there a world where there can be both a deposition of Admiral Bradley as well as a subpoena to actually get those tapes that Trump himself even today said, oh yeah, if I've got them, then we'll release them, which of course, sounds an awful lot like what they said about the Epstein files 11 months ago. And here we are.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure whether we'll see if Wicker would actually go to that full of an investigation. I'm glad the fact that he's promised it. Between promises and actions, I've found a lot of my Republican friends seem to lose their courage when it comes to actually acting. It's easy to say some of these things, but you got to stay hopeful. I mean, this administration's approach to the uniformed military has been, basically disrespectful almost since day one. And I've been waiting, whether it's people on the Armed Services Committee or, frankly, people on my Intelligence Committee. When are they going to have a backbone to stand up and say, that's just not the way we operate in this country?
For the folks that you work with on the Republican side in the Republican conference, is this moment that moment? I mean, we have seen so many instances where it feels like there's no bar, where it feels like no lengths that they will go to are too far, that the administration can do anything and they're not going to be willing to speak out. And so is this that instance? Are you hearing from your Republican colleagues that they're fed up here? Or do you feel like this is just one more thing that Republicans have done, that Trump and Hegseth have done, and it is what it is because they're afraid of a mean tweet?
Well, Brian, listen, I do have felt at times like a little bit like Charlie Brown on the football.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us have who, I've been criticized for being too bipartisan. I've stopped being in bipartisan gangs, for the last few months because I didn't feel like any of the Republicans would step up. On top of that, I've had 2 or 3 occasions where, particularly on the Intelligence Committee, where we're in a classified setting, in a SCIF, that more people would speak up when they fired the head of the NSA, General Tim Hawk, for political reasons, when they fired the general at the Defense Intelligence Agency for his accurate report on the Iran bombing. They fired him there. When we've seen the FBI decimated, I kept thinking that at least in a classified setting, they'd raise their voices. I get a lot of, boy, Mark, you're right. Boy, Mark, you're right. Or boy, Mark, you're acting like our conscience. And it's really been probably been the worst experience of my public life to see men and women that I thought would stand up for the Constitution, but consistently roll over in these last very bizarre 11 months.
So let's talk about you in Virginia. You've just announced your reelection in the state of Virginia, and so why are you deciding to run again?
There's two or three reasons. One, I do think as a former tech guy, technology competition with China is, the issue of our time. It's, not going to be the driving issue in the election, but I do think whether it's AI, whether it's quantum, whether it's, next generation wireless, biotech, making sure America stays in the game and competes is extraordinarily important. Second, I think I can be one of the most effective and have been, particularly around national security issues, on pushing back on Trump excesses. And at some point, the system is going to have to, it's either going to break or more people are going to push back. And with my record of working with some of the Republicans, I'll be one of the first people that they'll work with. And frankly, it also obviously goes to affordability. It goes to kind of classic issues we're all fighting about, protecting Americans' health care. But an issue that I particularly want to bring to the table, not just in Virginia, but I think it'll be an issue, frankly, by 26 and definitely by 28 will be at the front of the debate. And that is, the economic disruption caused by artificial intelligence. I believe AI can bring a lot of positive, but there's going to be a dark underbelly of this. And a lot of that is going to be job dislocation. We've already got, for example, 9% of recent college graduates are unemployed. A lot of that is due to the fact that, those entry-level jobs coming out of college are the first jobs being eliminated by AI. I think that 9% number could go to 25%. That's an awful lot of young people. On top of that, an awful lot of pissed off parents who are going to have sunk a couple $100,000 on college education and their kid not having a job. I think who can be the person that can force the AI tech community to actually help us design what that 3 to 5 year transition look like and how to pay for it. I think I can add some value on that. So I've got the classic Democratic issues, but I've also got where I think I can particularly add value around technology that I think is going to become more important than ever.
You've also announced that this is going to be your last term in the Senate. Where did you come up with that idea? How does the issue of generational change factor in?
I think it's really important to do generational change. But I also felt like as somebody who has been a governor, been a senator for a while, that I'm adding some peak value at this point. But I don't want to be, and I know it's, my staff and others say, no, never say you're going to not do it again. Well, I'm 70 years old. I work in the only place in America where that is actually middle-aged, which is kind of weird. But I think I want to make clear that part of my job, if I'm rehired by the folks in Virginia, is to make that generational transition to next generation of leaders. And I think as a senior Democrat and hopefully a Senate that's controlled by the Democrats, which I think we're going to have a much better chance than 3 months ago, being part of that shift will be an important role that I'll play.
On a separate point in Virginia, the Virginia House Speaker, Don Scott, Democrat, had just suggested that the legislature is considering drawing a 10-1 map now that we're in this kind of Cold War, this arms race to the bottom, as Trump and J.D. Vance and these Republicans redraw their maps across the country. They started in Texas. They moved over to Missouri and Ohio, North Carolina. We're seeing the process play out in Indiana, likely Florida right after that. Democrats have responded in California, and they've started the process in Virginia as well. Of course, that takes two consecutive sessions to be able to propose an amendment to the Constitution. But what is your reaction to the prospect of a 10-1 map, considering right now this is a 6-5 congressional delegation. And I think a lot of people were assuming that we would be somewhere in the ballpark of 8-3 or maybe even 9-2, but 10-1, 10-1, I think is the most extreme gerrymander that they could take to counteract what we're seeing from Republicans.
Well, listen, Don Scott is a great friend. He was also the architect of picking up 13 additional seats in our state house. We got 100 members. We were at 51. We're now at 64. A lot of that is due to Don Scott.
Yeah.
He and I have talked about this a lot. I'm going to be supportive in any way I can. It's a pretty funky map to get anything close to 10-1. So, but the good thing about that is whatever the legislature agrees on that we can get passed. I mean, again, we got to go back to the voters of Virginia and get this passed. And Virginia is not California. And obviously, you're going to have the incumbent Democrats have views on this as well. So, whatever we can get at that doesn't come back and frankly hurt us. I mean, we've seen in some of the overreach, especially after the Tennessee election, that some of those seats in Texas that the Republicans drew may not end up being Republican seats. So, I want to push it. I want to be part of something that makes sure that we got as many Democratic votes as possible, but I also want to make sure it's something that we're going to be successful at.
For folks who are watching right now, how can they help your campaign?
You can check out markwarnerva.com. It's love to learn more about me, learn more about what my issues are. I'm proud of my record. I'm excited about this campaign. I'm excited about pushing back. I never thought in my lifetime that I'd see the kind of excesses coming out of this Trump administration. I remember the first couple of months when folks were saying, well, do you think we'll have elections in 26 and 28? And I thought that was overstatement. I can't, those are legitimate questions to ask right now. And we all have to be part of this fight. There's never going to be a more important election cycle. And at the most important thing at the bottom line, I know people are complaining who's going to be our 28 candidate or what's the one message going to be. It's got to be, we got to win. We got to beat these guys. And I do think that is coupled not only with affordability, health care, but I also think we need as Democrats to be a forward-leaning, pro-growth, pro-innovation party. And I hope to be one of the architects of that.
I'm going to put your link to your website right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Senator, appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Brian.